Captain Jack Lawson never imagined his diplomatic mission would lead him to such a place. Varus, a planet far away from Earth, was known for its advanced civilizations and fierce alien rulers. As a member of the United Earth Forces, Jack had been tasked with representing humanity on this important diplomatic mission. He wasn't the first human to visit Varus, but he was one of the few who had earned the respect of the alien leadership. The journey had been long, taking weeks of travel through the stars. The Varus system was known for its swirling nebulas and twin suns, which bathed the planet in strange light. When Jack's ship landed on the surface, he was immediately struck by the beauty of the planet. Towering spires of crystal reached into the sky, and the streets were lined with trees that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. But none of this compared to the palace of the Varus Queen. Jack had been briefed about the Queen of Varus, a being of immense power and beauty, who ruled over millions of species across the galaxy. She was revered and feared in equal measure. Her throne was the symbol of authority for her entire empire, and many had tried and failed to challenge her rule. The queen was said to be cold, calculating, and ruthless, with an iron grip on her people. Jack wasn't afraid, though. He had faced the dangers of space travel and had seen the horrors of war. His mission was clear: to form an alliance between Earth and the Varus Empire. But to do that, he had to face the Queen herself. As Jack entered the grand hall of the palace, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The walls were adorned with precious gems, and the air was thick with the scent of strange flowers that bloomed from the ceiling. A long red carpet led to the throne, where the queen sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the door. She was everything the rumors had promised. Tall, with skin that shimmered like polished metal, her eyes glowing with a mysterious, fiery hue. Her hair, dark and flowing, seemed to move as if it had a life of its own. She was dressed in a gown of flowing black fabric that seemed to absorb the light around her, making her presence even more intimidating. Jack approached, his boots making no sound on the marble floor. The queen's eyes never left him, and for a moment the air seemed to crackle with tension. He could feel her power even from across the room, but he held his ground, walking up the steps to stand before her. Captain Jack Lawson, representative of Earth, a voice like velvet rang out from the queen's lips. "You have come to seek an alliance. What makes you think your species is worthy of my attention?" Jack's heart beat in his chest, but he remained calm. He had prepared for this moment, studying everything he could about Varus and its ruler. He knew that this was more than just a political meeting. This was a test. The queen would not be impressed by simple flattery or empty words. "I believe humanity has much to offer the galaxy," Jack replied, his voice steady. "We may be young, but we have learned from our mistakes. We understand the value of cooperation, of building alliances, and of working together for the greater good." The queen's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Cooperation?" she asked, her voice tinged with amusement. "Your species is a young one, and yet you claim to understand something so fundamental. What do you know of power, of ruling, of control?" Jack took a deep breath. This was the moment. "I know that true power doesn't come from fear. It comes from understanding. It comes from respect. And it comes from knowing that we're stronger together than we are apart." The queen's smile faded, replaced by a cold stare. "You speak of respect," she said softly, "but how dare you look at me with such confidence? You, a mere human, daring to meet my gaze. Do you not fear me?" For the briefest moment, Jack's heart skipped a beat. But then he remembered why he was here, what he stood for. He wasn't just representing Earth. He was representing everything humanity had fought for: freedom, equality, the ability to stand tall in the face of adversity. And so he smiled. "Because you're beautiful," he said simply. The words hung in the air between them, unexpected and honest. The room fell silent. The queen's expression faltered, her eyes narrowing slightly as she processed his words. It was not the response she had expected. No one had ever dared speak to her like this, not in all her years of ruling the Varys Empire. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jack stood tall, never breaking eye contact. The queen, who had ruled with fear and authority for so long, now found herself face to face with something she hadn't anticipated: admiration. "Beautiful," she repeated, as though tasting the word for the first time. Her voice was almost a whisper, softer than before, though still carrying the weight of her authority. "You dare to call me beautiful?" Jack nodded. "Yes, you're strong, you're powerful, and there's a certain grace in the way you carry yourself. It's not just your appearance, though. It's the way you hold the throne, the way you command respect. That's beauty in its own way." The queen's gaze remained fixed on him. For the first time, there was no malice in her eyes. Only a flicker of something different, something like curiosity. She leaned forward, her posture shifting slightly. "You are not like the others. You are not afraid." "Why?" Jack thought for a moment, then spoke with complete honesty. "I've seen enough fear in my life to know that it doesn't help anything. We all have our strengths, but I believe we can build something better by working together, not by cowering before each other." The queen studied him for a long moment, then slowly stood from her throne. Her movements were fluid, graceful, and powerful. She was a force of nature, but there was something different about her now. The walls she had built around herself seemed to be cracking, just a little. "You are different from the others," she said again, this time with a slight smile on her lips. "Perhaps there is something to be learned from your species after all." Jack's heart surged with hope, but he kept his composure. "I believe so. That's why I'm here, to offer an alliance, a chance for both of our peoples to grow." The queen studied him for a long time, and for the first time in a long while, she was not thinking of her empire, her throne, or her power. She was thinking about something much more personal, much more human. "Very well, Captain Lawson," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Let us see if you are right." The days that followed were unlike any Jack had ever experienced. What had started as a simple diplomatic mission had turned into something far more complex. The Queen of Varys, a being he had once feared and revered, had become someone he could speak to, someone who was, perhaps, not so different from himself after all. Every day, Jack and the Queen met in the palace, discussing everything from intergalactic trade to the future of their peoples. But as they spent more time together, their conversations became less about politics and more about themselves. The Queen, who had once been a figure of untouchable power, now seemed more like a person, someone with thoughts, doubts, and fears. Jack had never seen her this way. Despite her beauty and strength, the Queen had grown up in a world where weakness was punished, where vulnerability was a sign of failure. She had learned to hide behind her throne, her power, and the respect her empire demanded. But Jack, with his simple words, had shattered something inside her. She wasn't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but she couldn't stop thinking about it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the grand palace, the Queen found herself standing at the balcony, gazing out over the vast expanse of her empire. The light of the twin suns bathed the land in golden hues, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine a different life. A life where she wasn't bound by the weight of responsibility, a life where she could be free. "Captain Lawson," she called out without turning around, her voice carrying across the quiet. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to be someone else, to live without the burden of duty?" Jack stepped out onto the balcony, his footsteps light on the stone floor. "All the time," he said simply. "But then I remember why I'm here, and it gives me a sense of purpose. I think everyone has a role to play." The Queen let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You are lucky, Captain. You don't understand the weight of responsibility. You don't understand what it's like to have an entire empire depending on you." Jack looked at her, his expression serious. "You're right. I can't understand exactly what you're going through. But I do know what it's like to feel trapped by expectations, To feel like your future is already written and you're just playing your part. The queen's gaze softened, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel something close to vulnerability. You're not like the others. Most humans would fear me. They would bow to me, afraid of angering me. But you are different. Jack smiled, but there was no arrogance in it. Maybe it's because I've seen enough of the universe to know that power isn't everything. It's how we use that power that counts. And I think you could use yours differently. You could make a real difference. The queen's eyes lingered on him for a moment, and then, without a word, she turned away and walked back into the palace. Jack followed, sensing the shift in her mood. He had seen it before in others, when someone's carefully constructed world began to crack and they didn't know how to handle it. The queen was no different. She had spent her entire life in control, and now, for the first time, she was questioning everything. The next day, the queen called Jack to her private chamber. She was seated at a table, her posture stiff and regal, but there was something different in her eyes. Something uncertain. "Captain Lawson," she began, her voice unusually quiet, "I have been thinking about our conversations, about what you said." Jack sat down across from her, his expression patient. And I'm wondering," the queen continued, her voice tinged with doubt, "if it's possible. If what you're suggesting, an alliance, cooperation, true partnership, is possible for someone like me, for someone like us." Jack leaned forward, his tone sincere. "Anything is possible. But it requires trust, and that's something neither of us has. We'll have to build it." She nodded slowly, considering his words. "Trust," she repeated softly. "I have not trusted many people in my life, Captain Lawson. In fact, I trust very few." Jack smiled. "I understand. Trust isn't something that comes easily, but I think we can start with small steps. The first step is honesty. You've been honest with me, and I'll do the same." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Honesty," she mused. "What would you have me be honest about?" Jack didn't hesitate. "About who you are, not just as the Queen of Varys, but as a person. I want to understand you. I think that's the key to building trust." For a long moment the queen said nothing. Her gaze softened as she studied him, and Jack could see the internal struggle playing out in her mind. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. "I am not just a queen. I am a woman trapped by my own title. I was born to rule, to be the symbol of power. But power, it's not what I thought it would be. It's not enough. I want something more. I want to know what it's like to be free." Jack listened carefully, his heart aching for her. "You don't have to be alone in this. I'm here. I'm not just a diplomat or a soldier. I'm someone who sees you, not just your throne. And I believe we can change things, together." The queen's eyes widened slightly, as if the idea had never occurred to her. She had always ruled alone, had always carried the weight of her empire without ever asking for help. But Jack was offering something different, something real, and for the first time in years she was starting to consider it. You think we could really change things?" she asked softly, her voice filled with wonder. Jack nodded. "Yes, I do." For the first time, the queen allowed herself to feel a sense of hope. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to take the first step. Over the next few days, Jack and the queen continued their discussions. They talked about everything, from the history of the Varys Empire to the challenges humanity faced. They shared stories of their lives, their cultures, and their hopes for the future. Jack learned more about the queen's upbringing, about the strict traditions that had shaped her. And the queen learned about the struggles of Earth, about the challenges of building peace in a chaotic universe. But most importantly, they began to see each other not as two powerful figures, but as individuals, people who had been shaped by their circumstances, but who were capable of something greater. Together, they started to formulate a plan for an alliance, not just between their two empires, but between their people. As their bond grew stronger, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about creating a new future, one where power wasn't the sole determinant of value, where respect and understanding would replace fear and domination. But with that excitement came a new kind of pressure. The queen was beginning to trust Jack, but she was still a ruler, and her decisions would have consequences that reached far beyond their private conversations. There were still those in her court who saw Jack as nothing more than a tool, someone to be used for their own gain. And the queen knew that any decision she made would be scrutinized, questioned, and challenged. As they continued to work together, the queen began to realize something that had eluded her for years. True strength wasn't in controlling others. It was in the ability to let go, to trust, and to lead with compassion. And perhaps, for the first time, she was ready to do just that.